Welcome everyone to Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game. I'm your host, Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, the liability of your employees' actions, part 2 of our series on asset protection strategies for businesses with Ike Devji, attorney and asset protection specialist. Welcome to the second segment, Ike.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be with you.
Well, okay, I'm so glad you're back again, and we got through the umbrella on the first segment. Let's talk about this phrase. I see it on the internet all the time, EPLI, right? Give me the acronym, spell it out for me, and then let's start going through, and I mean it's a list of things that could happen for employers in relationship to their employees' actions.
I'm glad you brought this up, Steve. It is a very important line of defense for every business owner in America. EPLI in the industry terms, and again, I don't sell insurance, I'm an attorney, but I sure make my clients buy this as part of a competent asset protection plan. Stands for Employment Practices Liability Insurance. Almost universally, clients turn that around and call it employee lawsuit insurance. And the acronym is still the same. And however you think of it, the result is kind of the same. And it sounds like exactly what it is. It is specialty insurance that you buy as a standalone policy that is specifically there to protect you from employment-related exposure. Now, that exposure takes many different forms. In some cases, it's going to be actions against you as the employer and business owner by an employee, or someone is suing you for something like harassment, discrimination, wrongful discharge, a whole bundle of stuff that we can get into. In other cases, it will protect the business owner from their vicarious liability as an employer, and will in some cases also help protect the employer from third-party claims that their employees generate against the employer. Right? Because if somebody who works for you as a business owner does something bad to a third party that is even arguably related to their job, are they going to sue the employee or the employer? Where is the deeper pocket?
Right, right. All right, I'm thinking, you just brought up a few, sexual harassment, discrimination. It could be even age discrimination, right? It could be wrongful. You terminated me, not in the agreement of the HR agreement. You know, there's certain protocols written in your recruiting and your retention documents that I think you fired me wrongly. Now, those are things that I can kind of get, but I'm thinking about an employee who wrote some kind of unscrupulous comment about a client on his own personal Facebook page that got out. Now, is that, even though it was on his personal time and on his personal Facebook, he actually named the client. I'm thinking of an actual case. He named the client, and apparently he wasn't a very good client as far as on the phone. He actually named him. The client came back and said, defamation. Ike?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of exposure that we're talking about. Social media related exposures are growing for all kinds of employers. And let's talk about the different ways in which they can negatively affect you. For those who deal with confidential information, let's say we're talking about somebody like a physician's office or a law office, God forbid, or a financial advisor's office where they have a fiduciary and explicit duty, in some cases a legal duty, like with HIPAA protected information, to protect that information as confidential, that can be a problem itself. So for instance, a employee of a medical clinic, if we're sticking with that example for just a minute, even saying who a patient is, that can be construed, I think, by an aggressive attorney to have been that kind of a breach. What if it's something sensitive or something embarrassing? Maybe it's a proctology clinic or a sexual dysfunction clinic. Would you want an employee of that kind of a clinic to go on Facebook and talk about you by name and have everybody draw or guess that inference of what you were being treated for? So certainly that could be an issue. We've seen issues where employees have taken photographs of themselves or taken photographs of high-profile individuals, celebrities, things like people like that who are in getting different kinds of treatment or different kinds of services. We've seen it for counseling. We've seen it in law offices. We've seen it in lots of places. where that information has been leaked or even sold to the press. Those are obviously the most extreme cases, but there are many cases where somebody can go on and just defame an everyday citizen, and the effect to that person is just as serious, right? So it's not just that you have to do this to someone whose public image would be tarnished. Yeah, that is certainly one issue.
I'm just trying to look at the basic employer relationship. He's just hired the guy. Hopefully he vetted him. Hopefully he did background check. I'm kind of assuming a lot here because maybe they don't do enough background check, enough vetting. Didn't clear the person, right? And so now they've done something like they mishandled medical information. And even if it was over just I had a cardiovascular event, who cares? I don't want that out, right? That breach of information on client, even though we've done everything we can in HR to protect that, told them you have to handle it by this protocol. Now I'm up against it because my employee actually did this. So I still have a liability here.
That's correct. It's what we call a strict liability issue. Either you did it or you didn't. The law doesn't really care why or how. Either the breach occurred or it did not. And in many cases, there are statutory fines and other penalties that come with these things that are very black and white. There is no emotion or subjectivity connected with many of these things. It's like speeding, right? That's another, another kind of offense that falls in the same category. Either you were over or you weren't. The reasons often don't matter. So when we talk about the strict liability on these issues, things that employees do can affect you negatively in a number of ways. We've also seen it affect employers very seriously in terms of crisis management, even when the employee's conduct doesn't have anything to do with their actual job, but just the idea that somebody who worked at a certain kind of company then went out and did something else that was illegal or unprofessional can reflect very badly on the innocent employer, the innocent business owner in many cases as well. And the higher profile that person is, the more likely it is to be on the news. So for instance, think about, the 1,000 people that got arrested over the weekend across the country for things like some kind of sex-related crime or a serious DUI or something else that none of us will ever know about, right? But what if it's a doctor, right? Or what if it's somebody who's got the title of company president, right? Those people are going to be in the news because it's simply more interesting to the general public for whatever reason, whatever our psychology is. And it brings attention and it brings liability. It brings liability. Remember that, as attorneys, the attorneys are always looking for a deeper pocket to collect and draw them into it as well. And the employee lawsuit insurance, or as we said, the employment practices liability insurance that we're talking about, is also vital to protect the business owner themselves from those direct claims by the employee. You brought up sexual harassment. Most people would be shocked to know that the current average national verdict is $530,000 just on that one kind of claim. Now, in addition to the reputational damages that kind of claim brings if it becomes public, right? And everything moves around the internet at light speed these days, whether it's true or not, whether you're convicted or not, that damage is still done, and you have the cost of defending yourself against that kind of claim, which on its own can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, plus the exposure of what, God forbid, what if you lose? Then there's a big judgment that can be, as we said, on that one issue, $500,000 to several $1 million, right? We've seen very big awards.
No, I'm thinking of an employee, even if I have a small company, 20, 30 employees, and I have one of those claims, that could be hurtful. What kind of numbers? Now, yesterday we talked about, the umbrella policy in the first segment. So I get that, a couple $100, $250 a year, got $1 million umbrella. What's EPLI? What's the kind of cost we're looking at that?
It's obviously an underwriting specific question, like every other insurance question that we would talk about, right? So I think that, it's important for people and business owners to understand that their underwriting will be based on a number of factors, not the least of which is their past record, past claims, the size of the company, and those things will factor in. For most small business owners, what we typically see is a couple of $1,000s a year.
And that covers almost all the things we've chatted about.
That is for the sort of $1 million liability limit EPLI policy that I tell most of my clients would be the minimum. Now, obviously, if it's a much larger business with 50 or 100 employees, then that number should be bigger, and they need to work with an experienced and multi-line, insurance broker who's a commercial insurance expert to help them figure out what that number should be. But for me as an attorney, my advice to clients is let's get you with that expert, and let's get you at least $1 million as a starting point to cover both defense costs and the award in some cases as well if there is an award against you. You want to have enough cushion there to protect you.
Wow, well, don't forget to watch our next segment, the cyber liability of a data breach, part 3 of our series on asset protection strategies for businesses. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or your financial advisor. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.